Hey, folks, welcome to the Battles of the First World War podcast. So joining us again today on the podcast is Michel Gravel. The focus of his several works on the First World War is the Arras-Cambrai Road, particularly the 1918 battles fought there. Michel is French-Canadian, raised in Ontario, Canada. He has worked in construction sales since before 1995. Michel visited the Somme battlefield somewhat by mistake in 1984 when he was 16, and there he discovered the cemeteries. To use a cliched line, the rest is history, but history that he has been writing. Michel's presentation today is especially poignant for him as it is the culmination of 2 decades of dedicated research. He has worked since 2007 to put this full story together, and I am so grateful that he has chosen the BFWWP as the first place to tell this story. So grab yourself a coffee or other beverage and get comfortable. To prove there is something here for everyone, including those of us who enjoy toilet humor, Michel has named this presentation the Butt Wood Victoria Crosses. I can't wait to find out the backstory behind that. So, these are stories that took place on September 2nd, 1918, amongst the forces of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. I, for one, am glad to hear and share the World War I stories of our longtime allies and esteemed neighbors to the north. And I hope I say this right, guys. Elbows up. Okay? So, Michel, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you for coming on the podcast again, and thank you to everyone who has joined the call this evening.
Well, thank you. I'm really thrilled. I'm all pumped up and psyched up about doing this. I've literally been working on this really as far back. The idea came in 2003. I started putting things together in 2007, and it just. I was with my kids yesterday, and I told them how long it took, and they said, "Well, you must type slow." But as you know, it's journalism we do sometimes, and you have to wait till you find the smoking guns or the semblance of a smoking gun. It's a long presentation. If it's too much, we can do it in 2 sittings, but I'm hoping that you'll be as enthralled as I am with the detail. This is a detail story. If you want detail, you've come to the right place. I can't imagine finding any more out unless we came up with a memoir that was in an attic somewhere. But I was ready to say I'm done.
Okay.
Okay. So I tried to up my production values. I use AI actors, and Jan, I didn't like the German accent on the AI, so I used a real human being, Jan Jonkier, and you'll see it's very effective. So here we are.
The Butt Wood Victoria Crosses, a virtual Great War battlefield tour, September 2nd, 1918, by Michel Gravel, completed May 20th, 2026. My name is Lieutenant Colonel H.M. Urquhart, DSO, MC, ADC, author of The History of the 16th Battalion Canadian Scottish in the Great War, a work that will be quoted at length throughout this presentation. I will assist Michel in narrating this presentation. We hope to underline the achievements of the men featured herewith.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Cyrus Wesley Peck, VC, DSO, and Bar, MP, officer commanding the 16th Battalion Canadian Scottish. While serving in France, I was a sitting member of the Canadian Parliament, proudly representing a riding in British Columbia. Please listen carefully to Colonel Urquhart and Michel. I understand Michel has, as you say in the 21st century, done a deep dive in the goings-on at Butt Wood. As Glenn Kerr would say, this story has a lot of moving parts.
So when I started, I worked on a project to commemorate the liberation of a place called Cagnicourt in 2003, and I went for help which Norm advised me against doing, to my member of parliament, and they did some research, and they came back to me and said, "We looked into it, Mr. Gravel, nothing happened at Cagnicourt." This was said to me by a parliamentary staffer in 2003, and it's a good thing I didn't listen. In fairness, the Battle of the Drocourt-Quéant Line has a misleading name. This is the battle we're talking about. It should have been called the Battle of Drocourt-Quéant. Maybe the name would have gotten more fame. Just some interesting, I don't want to get, I've done other presentations explaining the impact of the Battle of the Drocourt-Quéant Line on the Greater War, but there's some quotes here. One is from the New York Times. It was a headline. The victory on the Drocourt-Quéant Line, Drocourt-Quéant, is one of the great victories of the war. This was on September 9, 1918 in the New York Times. And then the Kaiser is well documented as having, when he found out that the Drocourt-Quéant Line had been breached, he said, he slammed his hands on the table and said, "We have lost the war." So the breaking of the Drocourt-Quéant Line and the road getting more open to Cambrai was a real turning point in the northern western front.
Slides for the main story will be lilac in color as such. Section header tiles will be in pink as such. Slides for any rabbit holes or tangential stories will be in mint green as such.
It's quite a hefty presentation, so I really worked hard on organizing the information. And please feel free to stop me. But the geography, I do this all the time. There's Arras, there's Verdun. I put that up for Mike's viewers. It's quite a ways from Verdun, your normal stomping ground. There's Cambrai, and that's the Arras-Cambrai road. Everything I've written about is about the road from Arras to Cambrai. So if we zoom in, there's Arras on the left, Cambrai in the southeast, and Cagnicourt, which is the center of this presentation, is midway. And it sits on the Drocourt-Quéant Line. I'll show a map of that later. So objective, sources, and thank yous. I want to tell the tragic story of Tank 9355 and the unknown tank private of Dominion Cemetery. And my other objective is to describe the VC action of Bill Metcalf, VC MM, Cyrus Peck, VC DSO, and Martin Doyle, VC MM. Martin Doyle would be unknown probably to my Canadian friends. He was an Irishman, but he was one of the Butt Wood Victoria Crosses. And the what started my interest in eventually putting this together was when I found an unknown private in Dominion Cemetery. He was from the Tank Corps, and I remember saying, "Why is there only one of you? And like, why are you here? And why are you unidentified? There was only one of them." And it left me down this road, and you'll see pictures of me 22 years ago, and I look like it's my son, not me. That's how long this has been brewing. These are my sources. I had a creative way of footnoting this. I always take a picture of the document that I'm using. A whole bunch. There's more sources than that. There was 2 or 3 tank reports that I used. There was one submitted by to the Canadian Scottish by the Tank Corps. There was one submitted to the 3rd Tank Brigade, which was the higher formation, and there was the company commander's report. And they're hard to reconcile. It's not as slick as, there's some contradictory stuff that I had to wade through, and you'll see. If I'm not sure of something, I admit it. There's things we'll never know. I want to thank Jan Jonkier, volunteer at Flanders Field Museum. He was a translator and a voice actor. He played the Germans in this presentation. He's Flemish, but close enough for our needs. So thank you, Jan.
No problem.
So the story focuses mainly on the 3rd Canadian Highland Brigade, which was part of the 1st Canadian Division. in 1918, the Canadian divisions had 3 brigades of 4 battalions each. The battalions are unrelated. The brigades are sort of like regiments in the U.S. Army, but the battalions have nothing to do with each other. They're just brigaded together. Whereas I think like the whatever regiment in the U.S. Army, they're all a family, right? The three battalions.
Right, right. Michel, real quick, numbers wise, how big is a Canadian brigade?
25 to 2,800 bayonets in the field.
Okay, and then a Canadian division?
Well, Norm, what is that? Do you know? Is it 15,000 or something like that? Oh, I know, about 15,000. The Canadian divisions were larger than British divisions in 1918 because
Right.
they had cut down. The brigades to 3 battalions. The Canadians kept their 4 battalions, and they even added an extra 100 bayonets to each battalion. Because this was because there had been pressure to create a 5th Canadian division and ultimately a Canadian Army instead of a Canadian Corps. And the Arthur Currie, who very wisely said the Canadian Corps, as it sits, is a well-oiled machine. We don't need to dilute it. So he actually argued against his own promotion to full general, which shows you what kind of guy this guy was. So the 3rd Canadian Highland Brigade, the 3 of the 4 battalions were kilted. So Lieutenant Colonel Cyrus Peck was 16th Battalion, Canadian Scottish. Lieutenant Colonel Worrell, this guy was only 27 or 28, had been decorated already at St. Julian in 1915, rose through the ranks, became CO of the 14th Battalion, Royal Montreal Regiment. They're the only battalion in the brigade that didn't wear a kilt. They tried in 1914 to kilt them, but the men were recruited from a rifle regiment, a French-Canadian infantry regiment, and a guards unit. And so they said, look, we're anything but a Highland regiment. So they refused to wear a kilt. There's Lieutenant Colonel McQuaig, was the 13th Battalion, the Canadian Black Watch. And Lieutenant Colonel Bent, very famous commander of the 15th Battalion, but he was on leave for this operation. So the acting CO was Major Gervin, which we're going to talk about more. This is a Canadian Highlander. I actually went to the War Museum, paid $22 to take a picture of Cyrus Peck's medals, and they're back in storage. So this is a Canadian Highlander. It's not the 3rd Brigade. This is a 3rd Division soldier, but this is exactly what they would look like. They had an apron in front, this is what these guys look like, and they must have made an impressive sight when they were advancing. And this is a fairly famous picture at the War Museum. This is the original. It shows the 16th Canadian Scottish in 1918. So the Cagnicourt villages, it's important to know there are 4 villages named Cagnicourt. There's Cagnicourt proper. There's Hendecourt-les-Cagnicourt, which we're going to talk a lot about. There's Villers-les-Cagnicourt and Riancourt-les-Cagnicourt. Now, Les is spelled L-E-S or L-E-Z. It's Old French for near or in proximity of, which I suspect this is a post office thing because there's an awful lot of villages named Villers and Hendecourt in France. So it's basically Hendecourt near Cagnicourt. But I call them the Cagnicourt villages. There's a landmark that's important. It's Dominion Cemetery. It's the 3rd Brigade burial ground for September 1st and 2nd, 1918. It says here Bois d'Endecourt. On the trench maps, it was called Upton Wood. This is the Crow's Nest, which we're going to talk a lot about. There's Upton Wood Cemetery. That's the burial ground of the 2nd Canadian Brigade for September 1st and 2nd, 1918. So the 2 brigade original cemeteries were just acquired and renovated after the war. So it's very interesting. If you ever go here after you've seen this detailed presentation, you'll see the guys in the cemetery that I talked about. They're all still there, except some died of wounds. So early research at Dominion Cemetery. In 2003, I took a trip in June of 2003 to Hendecourt-le-Cagnicourt, Arras-Cambrai sector. My interest was my uncle was with the Royal Montreal Regiment in this action. Some of his friends are buried in Dominion Cemetery, but the presentation's not about the Royal Montreal Regiment. It's more about the Canadian Scottish and other units. And then I found this testimony. This guy's Reverend Renison. He was the chaplain for the 21st Canadian Battalion, 2nd Canadian Division. They relieved the 1st Canadian Division, I think, on September 4th, 1918, after the battle had happened. And he says that he officiated at many funerals at Dominion Cemetery.
A little way to the left of Cagnicourt, there was a place known as Dominion Cemetery. It was my privilege to officiate there many times. There are rows upon rows of little wooden crosses there, and many funerals were held every day, even while we were holding the line.
That's him. So, like, my journey starts in 2003, but in 2007, I had kind of figured out who the missing soldier was. So I put together a little, it's about a 12-minute movie, and I think it's quite, I really like it. I hope you'll appreciate the pace of it, but it's important for you to see this, to put this whole mess of a story into context. I'm not giving you any information that you don't need. You have to see the whole presentation to see to understand the context of Metcalf's VC and Peck's VC and the men around them. I really went out of my way to go into the weeds, like Colonel Peck said. So that's me that took this. Those are really traditional British hymns for Remembrance Day. So anyway, I hope that wasn't too long, but this is the crow's nest from Upton Wood Cemetery, what you saw in the movie. And this is Upton Wood, which we're going to talk a lot about. So the Drocourt-Quéant Line was a powerful switch line connecting the Hindenburg Line in the vicinity of Quéant with the fortifications of Lens in the north. This became necessary to the Germans after their loss of Vimy Ridge and Monchy-le-Preux in 1917. In early September, the Canadian Corps of the First Army, reinforced with a British division and tanks, was the spearhead tasked to undertake what I call a surgical strike against the line on a relatively narrow front, in the hopes of outflanking the Hindenburg Line to the south. This could make the Hindenburg Line untenable on the Somme and maybe parts farther south, relieving pressure on the British there. The Third Army's 17 Corps was on the right, was ordered to conform with any Canadian success. There's some noise.
Sorry.
So this is the Hindenburg Line. It goes from the Somme to the Aisne, basically. This is the fortifications of Arras, which were gone by 1918, and therefore the Germans had to, in 1916 or 17, built this switch line called the Drocourt-Quéant Line to connect the French Flanders defenses with the Hindenburg Line at a village called Quéant, not far from Cagnicourt. So the Crow's Nest, September 1st, 1918, it's a preliminary action. So on the 3rd Brigade front, a preliminary operation was necessary before they attacked the Drocourt-Quéant Line on September 2nd. It was the capture of the Crow's Nest. The Crow's Nest is a scene here from Upton Wood Cemetery, burial ground of the 2nd Canadian Brigade. The cemetery is on the 2nd Brigade sector, but we're looking south towards the Crow's Nest, which is 3rd Brigade sector. Both were 1st Division. So this is a splendid photo. It's a landmark. If you know enough about the battle now, if you're in Arras, you should go see it. It's you'll see the battle will evolve right in front of your eyes. So this is the jump-off line for September 1st, 1918, and I'm going to let Colonel Urquhart tell the story.
The original date set for the attack on the Drocourt-Quéant Line was September 1st, but on August 31st, a large part of the wire was reported to be still uncut, and a completely satisfactory assembly position for the assaulting troops had not been secured. On the 3rd Brigade front, the enemy still held a post of vantage between the attacking troops and their objective, known as the Crow's Nest. A high, narrow, bare bluff, about 400 yards long and 60 feet high. It lay approximately 1,000 yards short of and overlooking the Drocourt-Quéant defenses and, as its name implies, commanded a wide field of vision. In consideration of all these circumstances, the main attack was postponed until September 2nd, and the 15th Battalion, 48th Highlanders of Canada, with No. 2 Company of the 16th in support, was ordered to take the Crow's Nest at dawn on September 1st. This minor operation was successfully carried out. Thus, during the morning and afternoon of the 1st, it was possible for the attacking battalions to reconnoiter at leisure the approaches to the battlefront. They were also able to choose their assembly areas, gain a general idea of the ground over which stretched along the forward slope of a ridge running across the entire front.
So that's the Crow's Nest. You'll see it from many angles in this presentation. This is the Hendecourt Shadow Wood. And the 48th Highlanders, the 15th Battalion, attacked and captured both woods. So now we're coming out, we're on the opposite side of the Crow's Nest. This is the east end of the Crow's Nest. So you see, this is the Crow's Nest. This is Shadow Wood, but we're We're at the other end. We're near the assembly area for September 2nd.
After the successful operation, a reconnaissance party of the 16th Battalion to the Crow's Nest were met by an unexpected sight. When we reached the top of the Crow's Nest, wrote an officer present, we got out our glasses and commenced to scan the country in the direction we were going to attack.
So this is the view of the Crow's Nest, looking towards Cagnicourt and the Drocourt-Quéant Line. From here, you couldn't see the barbed wire yet of the Drocourt-Quéant Line. That's why they needed to capture the Crow's Nest to have a better jump-off line for the main attack. This is Trigger Copse, and this is the famous famous Butt Wood. It's basically a line of hedges. But I picked the name because it's my favorite name there. And this is calling card wood. These three woods are, you get your bearings because the whole battlefield relies on this. But what's interesting is, except for the trenches being gone, the cemetery's still there. Everything's still there. The little forests are still there. The copse, they call them. And I asked a guy who worked at it. There's an experimental farm in Villers-les-Cagnicourt, and I asked the guy there. I said, it's funny, the trees are still where they were 100 years ago. And he said, well, it's not strange, because the trigger copse in French, they call it le bois des fraîchants, the damp ground. Anywhere where the ground wasn't suitable, it was either there's a spring or too much moisture. For centuries, they've been plowing around it. So the forests, the little bushes just stay, they persist. Yeah, so I found that interesting. Oh, and this is Trigger Alley. There was a communication trench that went from Trigger Copse down to Hendecourt.
The first thing I saw was a line of figures emerging from a trench and advancing on the battalion holding the front. No mistaking them, they were Huns. No barrage, light shelling. I called Mabin's attention to this and told the forward artillery observation officer, who phoned for an SOS. The enemy continued to come in our direction. I could make out parties carrying machine guns, and on our left and to the front our fellows were coming back, but there was no sign of strife. The line was too far for the Lewis guns on the Crow's Nest to reach it. Our barrage then dropped and scattered the Huns, who disappeared in the small wood on our front. Trigger Copse.
And Mabin is Captain W. Mabin, MCMM, acting 2IC of the 15th Battalion. So this is the 3rd Brigade battlefield. There's the Crow's Nest. And I'm standing right here, or the Google car standing right here. And this is I'm standing, the little man is standing on the front line on the evening of September 1st, 1918. So they're between Trigger Copse and the Crow's Nest. And this is what it looks like. So you can imagine the Crow's Nest is here. That's Upton Wood. The 48th Highlanders were on the right, and Royal Montreal Regiment were on the left, and I believe my uncle was part of that group. This is a tangent. In 2010, I helped a guy named Brigadier Young to put up a memorial for the 48th Highlanders 15th Battalion at the Crow's Nest, and he did all the work, but I got to write the plaque. And the plaque says this.
On August 26, 1918, only weeks after its costly victory at Amiens, the Canadian Corps advanced from Arras in the general direction of Cambrai. The main obstacle barring the route was the Drocourt-Quéant Line, a German defensive position of vital importance. After 6 days of bloody combat, the Canadians pushed the enemy back 10 kilometers and reached the outposts in front of the Drocourt-Quéant Line. The most impressive of these was the Crow's Nest, the wooded hill behind this marker. The capture of this well-fortified redoubt was critically necessary for the success of the main attack against the Drocourt-Quéant Line. The 15th Battalion, 48th Highlanders of the 3rd Brigade, 1st Canadian Division, was ordered to capture the Crow's Nest, as well as the ruins of Hendecourt Chateau in an adjacent wood. Before dawn on September 1st, the 15th Battalion advanced from trenches to the west of the Hendecourt-Drury Road behind you. Supported by a rolling artillery barrage, the Highlanders assaulted and captured the Crow's Nest and the Hendecourt Chateau Wood and consolidated their line beyond the objective. The enemy, recognizing the importance of these positions, launched 3 determined counterattacks, but all failed. Despite having suffered numerous casualties, the capture of the Crow's Nest and Chateau Wood by the 15th Battalion secured a critical jump-off position for the follow-on assault of the Drocourt-Quéant Line by the Canadian Corps on September 2, 1918. The soldiers of the 15th Battalion, 48th Highlanders, who fell on the field of honor on September 1st and 2nd, 1918, are forever at rest in the Dominion Cemetery at Hendecourt.
Now, this here, I dug up some old footage from 2010. We couldn't afford to bring a piper over, so a volunteer from the Somme pipe band, a French guy, played the pipes for it. It's appropriate. It's a Highland regiment. But I said, you don't happen to know the Maple Leaf Forever? It's an old Canadian patriotic song. And he goes, yes, of course I do. So he's the only Frenchman who can play that tune on the pipes in France, I'm sure. So you can see the Crow's Nest here. So the rear areas in Unicorn Trench, September 1st, 1918. So this is Hendecourt. That's the Crow's Nest. This is Upton Wood. That's the Upton Wood Cemetery. This is Cherisy and Fontaine. Now, Cherisy and Fontaine, Cherisy was captured by the 2nd Canadian Division on August 27, 1918. They fought there for 2 days. They got their asses handed to them in the Sensee Valley. The 52nd Lowland Division of the 3rd Army actually took Fontaine. That and Vis-en-Artois were I think, the first villages to be occupied since 1914 to be liberated in 1918. And I'll show you another picture. Oh, and this is Sun Quarry Cemetery, which is going to come up later. And here, number 2 Company of the 16th Battalion on September 1st moved their headquarters forward into Unicorn Trench because they were in support of the 15th at the Crow's Nest. Although they didn't really do anything, they were there in support and they didn't need their help. But it became the advanced HQ for Colonel Peck in the evening of September 1st because he was getting ready to put his boys in to attack. And anyway, this is looking from the Crow's Nest towards Cherisy. On the right, you can see the west end of Upton Wood. That's Cherisy in the horizon. So the 2nd Division really suffered a lot of casualties in Cherisy and the little valley in front of it. But then on August 30th, the 1st Canadian Brigade of the 1st Canadian Division attacked from Cherisy and reached by August 31st, had secured Upton Wood. So I don't know how far this is, but this was the green fields of occupied France. Nobody had ever trod here before except the Germans. And this is where the riddle of the trenches was broken. This is where they actually, an Allied army actually broke through the organized defenses. Now they had all kinds more to deal with, so the battle wasn't over. And Urquhart must have been at the company headquarters, because he's looking in this direction and he describes the scene with the artillery coming up.
Battery after battery of field artillery came over the ridge west of Cherisy, the first village behind the front, and wheeled down into the valley behind Hendecourt Ridge. The enemy, who had clear observation on Cherisy and Fontaine, another village just behind the front, let the guns get in the hollow, and then opened fire with several batteries. Men, horses, guns, and limbers were bowled over. Riderless horses with and without limbers went careening all over the battlefield. To the great admiration of the 16th, the gunners, officers, and men, not immediately affected by the barrage, calmly went their way, choosing positions for the guns and bringing them into action. After 15 to 20 minutes of intense fire, the enemy slackened his efforts, and it was possible to straighten out the confusion.
If I zoom in, that's Cherisy. Left is Fontaine, and to the right is Vis-en-Artois. Mike, you stayed there. It's a set of villages that I use as landmarks all the time.
That's right.
Yeah. So, number 2 company dugout, Unicorn Trench, September 1st, 1918. So this is Upton Wood. You can see it on the picture and on the map. This is Hendecourt. That's the Crow's Nest. That is Unicorn Trench. It's part of what was called the Fresnes-Rouvois line, is one of the multiple switch lines that were, when they were advancing to Cambrai, it was fortifications for 30 kilometers, one after the other. The biggest one, well, it was the Canal du Nord, which they stormed 3 weeks later, but the DQ line was basically the Hindenburg line. It was the Hindenburg line that people fought at the end of September. Well, the Canadians were fighting on the 2nd of September. And this is the exact dugout where number 2 company's headquarters was, and the colonel would have been there on the evening of September 1st. I put it roughly on the map, on the picture where it would be. I hope you guys like detail. It's a detail presentation. So the 16th Battalion is in support, September 1st, 1918, and this is Colonel Urquhart again. Oh, and there's the dugout.
By dusk, all stores were issued. The commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Cyrus Peck, and the remainder of the headquarters went forward to number 2 company's dugout, and all companies were ordered to stand by in their respective positions, ready to move at short notice. As the brigade operation order had not been received up to that hour, at approximately 5 p.m., numbers 1, 3, and 4 company commanders were instructed to report to the commanding officer for a final conference at number 2 company headquarters at 8:30 p.m. This they did, leaving their companies in charge of the next senior officer, under orders for duty in the attack. Shortly after midnight the operation order arrived, and all officers concerned grouped themselves around the commanding officer to hear read and consider relative plans and arrangement. The constant thud overhead and the shuffling of men on the stairs told how the enemy was keeping the area under steady fire. Inside the dugout there was comparative silence, the low voices of the officers in conference, the occasional fall of earth from the roof onto the open maps as shell burst above ground, a slight stirring amongst the troops. Nothing more, until one more thud overhead brought a warning cry from the men in the trenches outside, a shuffle amongst those on the steps as some earth came scattering down.
So early casualties of the 16th Battalion. The medical officer was badly wounded. Peck thought he died, but he survived. This is on September 1st. And Sergeant Thomas Smith and Corporal Lewis Morton were killed and soon buried in Dominion Cemetery shortly after the battle. This is Sergeant Thomas Smith. You'd think it'd be impossible to track down a descendant with the name Smith, but I checked the register when I visited Dominion Cemetery, and they had visited the grave and left their address, so I got a picture of Sergeant Thomas Smith. And I love his personal inscription. It's "They miss him most that loved him best." And this is the headstone of Lewis Morton. So the two basically trench wastage. So we're at Unicorn Trench, but I'm looking towards Hendecourt now. There's the number 2 company dugout. There's Upton Wood. There's the Crow's Nest. There's Shadow Wood. And that's Hendecourt. So now we're still in the dugout. So I got to tell you the story of Pipe Major Jimmy Grote, DCM MM. And Peck has some nice things to say about him.
At midnight, the commanding officer gave the order to move. Numbers 1, 3, and 4 company commanders, whose men were lying in the open, immediately left for their companies. Number 2 company, which was in the dugout, got ready to follow. Colonel Peck, when speaking of the pipe band, helps to describe the scene in the dugout at this particular moment.
Jimmy Grote was standing not far away from me, puffing on a long black pipe and straining his eyes to read a paper in the flickering light from the candle on my table. I was leaning forward on the table close by him, gazing at the map of the coming battle. Word is passed down the stairs, "Move on, number 2 company." Grote quietly lays down the paper, nods to me, and turns to go. Then, in a moment, another order comes. "Stand fast, number 2, for 10 minutes. He turns and lays down his pipes on the wire bed, pulls out his old pipe and lights it, picks up the paper and reads. I don't think I ever saw a finer picture of mental control.
So Jimmy Grote, this is foreshadowing. On the next day, he would earn the Distinguished Conduct Medal. Pipers had been falling out of favor by 1918 at the front, but Peck, even though he hadn't, like he said, he had not a drop of Scottish blood in him, wanted a piper. He had 5 pipers when he went over the top. His personal one, which was likely Jimmy Grote on September 2nd, and every other company. And they each had a signature tune so they could rally the men around the pipers. He survived the war, but he shouldn't have. And I also read somewhere that at one time he was piping when shelling started. He was told to take cover, but pretended he didn't hear. He said afterwards, "No German is going to interrupt one of my tunes." He clearly had balls of steel. Now listen to his Distinguished Conduct Medal citation.
Pipe Major Jimmy Grote, DCM, MM and Bar, for conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty on the 2nd of September 1918 in the Second Battle of Arras. For the 4th or 5th time during this war, he played his battalion over the top in a battle. He was continually under heavy machine gun fire and at one time was playing in the midst of furious hand-to-hand fighting. At last he was wounded by shrapnel after adding a fine record to the courage of the Highland Pipers.
Yeah, this wasn't a guy to be trifled with. So the plan, September 2nd, 1918 attack. And it was Arthur Currie, the Canadian Corps commander. It was his plan.
On September 2nd, 1918, the right of the 1st British Army, the Canadian Corps, attacked with 3 divisions, the 1st and 4th Canadian Divisions and the 4th British Division, right to left. The 1st Canadian Division with 2 brigades, the 3rd and 2nd, right to left. The 3rd Brigade attacked with 2 battalions, the 16th and 13th, right to left. The 14th and 15th Battalions followed in reserve. The front right of the 1st Canadian Division was held by the 57th West Lancashire Division, 17th Corps, 3rd Army. The 171st Brigade of the later formation was in the line in front of Drocourt-Quéant, which it had captured on September 1st, in touch with the 16th in that battalion's assembly area. The 171st Brigade took no part in the Battle of September 2nd. On the morning of the 2nd, the 172nd Brigade of the 57th Division, 1st Royal Munster Fusiliers, and 4 South Lancashire Regiment attacking, was assembled behind the 3rd Brigade on 1st Army ground. The 172nd Brigade was detailed to follow up behind the 3rd Brigade, and, directly the latter formation had captured the Drocourt-Quéant Line, wheel to the right or south on the captured ground, and clear the enemy out of the triangle of trenches on that flank, in front of Drocourt-Quéant. The 2 attacking battalions of the 3rd Canadian Brigade, the 16th and 13th, were ordered to capture such parts of the Drocourt-Quéant front line, intermediate support as lay on their fronts. The task accomplished, the 15th and 14th battalions were to leapfrog the 16th and 13th and capture Cagnicourt, 2 woods and the high ground beyond.
So Lieutenant Colonel Peck of the 16th Battalion was not aware of the 57th Division's orders, and I'm going to show you on the map because it was a little convoluted with listening to it on this slide. There seems to have been no mention or consideration in his hastily issued orders that the 57th Division on his right was not going to advance. The reason seems to be that whatever tanks that were available were allotted to the Canadian Corps. Currie might have hogged all the artillery as well, but anyway, they were doing this complex maneuver, which I'm going to describe on the map. Peck would have to therefore advance with an exposed flank for 90 minutes, a fact that would change his life forever and almost ended it. The capture of Cagnicourt proper is beyond the scope of this presentation. So breaking the Drocourt-Quéant line, you'll hear Jan when he reads the German parts, they talk about the Wotanstellung, which is the Drocourt-Quéant line. And here we're on the right flank. So there's Cagnicourt, the objective. There's Hendecourt. There's the Drocourt-Quéant line. This is a switch line that goes to Vis-en-Artois. It's called the Vis-en-Artois switch. This is the Drocourt-Quéant support line. And this is a triangle of trenches. There are 2 little switch lines that connect to the Hindenburg line. So I'm just zooming down. I just scroll down for you. We're trying to outflank the Hindenburg line here. So there's Cagnicourt. There's Trigger Copse. And this triangle of trenches connected to the Hindenburg line. And the Hindenburg line is down here. Quéant is to the right and Bullecourt to the left. This is Riancourt-les-Cagnicourt. And for people that know Bullecourt, the Australians fought the first and second battles of Bullecourt in the red circle there. They weren't facing Bullecourt. They were actually trying to take Riancourt. But this is a tangent that anyway. So these are the landmarks. Hendecourt, sorry, I'm repetitive, but it's important to keep your bearings. Cagnicourt, there's Dominion Cemetery. There's the Crow's Nest. That's Trigger Copse, the Little Butt Wood, and that's Calling Card Wood. Now, this is a pre-drone era photo that I got from the town hall in Hendecourt. This is Hendecourt. This is the front line at Hendecourt-les-Cagnicourt in the Crow's Nest evening of September 1st, 1918. So there's Hendecourt. There's the Crow's Nest. That's Trigger Copse. That's Butt Wood. There's the Shadow Wood. That's the front line that was held by the 15th and 14th Battalions on the evening of 1st of September. So this is 3rd Canadian Highland Brigade, 1st Canadian Division, 48th Highlanders on the right, the Royal Montreal Regiment on the left. And now we're on 3rd Army front. The 27 King's Liverpool Regiment, 171st Brigade, was holding a trench in front of Hendecourt. They had captured Hendecourt the day before, and which was a surprise to Peck. They had no orders to advance immediately on the 2nd of September. So Peck was going to advance with, like I said, for 90 minutes. The way it was programmed, he'd have an open flank, which was turned out to be really devastating. The black line is the Hendecourt-Cagnicourt Road. That is the inter-army boundary. That's something nobody really realizes until you go deep in the weeds and look at the British. Why there was a communication problem. Imagine you're going from brigade to division, up to corps, up to army, then laterally to the 3rd Army, then back down the 17 Corps, back down the 57th Division, back down the 171st Brigade. You can, if you guys, anybody here been in the Army, you can imagine that this is a recipe for miscommunication, which is kind of what happened. 3rd Army, 1st Army. And it takes a lot of time to develop the story and explain the context of the battle. You really can't appreciate how great Colonel Peck's VC would be, considering what he was facing. So here we are, 3rd Brigade attack. There's the Crow's Nest. Now the 14th Battalion was holding the left. The 13th Black Watch were to storm the DQ line. The 16th Canadian Scottish passed through the 15th Battalion, and they were to attack the DQ line. They would actually go through and around and between Butt Wood and Trigger Copse. It's amazing that these little woods are still there. Like I'm just amazed when I see it. I could see the whole battle evolving in front of me. Now, the South Lancashire and the Royal Munsters of the 172nd Brigade, because the division on the right was not advancing with their own support, tanks and artillery, they put 2 battalions behind the 16th Canadian Scottish, and they were to, in 90 minutes, follow the 16th Battalion through the gap that they would create. So at 0 plus 90 minutes, they would they would make a right wheel and clear up the triangle of trenches I showed you earlier. The Royal Munster Fusiliers were on the right, they're from Ireland, and the South Lancashire were on the left. So that's what Colonel Urquhart was explaining. This is the maneuver, and believe it takes a long time to get. You have to read a lot of war diaries, and to sort this graph out took me forever to understand what it was, because it was really unconventional for an attack. So this 2-7 King's Liverpool 171st Brigade was in what's it called? Greyhound Avenue, in front of the Drocourt, in front of Doxon Avenue. Now I know for a fact there were Germans manning Doxon Avenue, but I don't think the South Lancashire cleared them out. I don't know. I can't figure out who took Doxon Alley. It's a moot point. There would have been outposts in front of the King's Liverpool, and presumably they would have probed and captured that. So the advance to the assembly area beyond the Crow's Nest. So this is the 16th Battalion now has to get into position. So here we go. These are Highlanders advancing in 1918. You have the Crow's Nest on the left, the Shadow Wood on the right. So the promised signal, the light on the Crow's Nest, was nowhere to be seen. The Crow's Nest, as a dense black body, thrust itself out of the night. Their jump off was at 5 o'clock, so this was after midnight. They're going up this hill here between the two woods to take up their position, and there was supposed to be a light on the Crow's Nest, but they didn't have it, so they used compass bearings. They were forming up in the middle of the night, and they'd never been there before. So I believe they either went in single file or two companies together. I'm not sure. But it started with number 1 company.
Numbers 1 and 4, company commanders. Directly they left the commanding officer, collected their men, and hastened forward. The journey presented no particular difficulties. Plenty of time had been allowed to accomplish it. It is true, the enemy was shelling the front area, and his planes dropping bombs, but, from the point of view of either danger or exhaustion, prevailing condition did not begin to compare with similar battle movements through the mud and artillery barrages of the salient and the Somme. The only worry was the making of certain direction. The night had continued very dark, and the promised signal, the light on the crow's nest, was nowhere to be seen. Finding their way by compass bearing, the company leaders moved ahead until the crow's nest, as a dense black body, thrust itself out of the night. They then veered towards the southerly end of this hill, and on reaching that point, turned southeast towards the assembly area.
So here we are, they've advanced. There's the crow's nest. There's Shadow Wood. This is a little sunken road. They were looking. Their right flank was the Drocourt-Quéant Road, which I'll show you soon. And there was a clump of trees near where the sunken road came up to regular level, and they couldn't find the trees. And when they came across this road, they were confused for a few minutes, and then they realized they thought this might be the road that they were going to use as their right flank, but it was an error. They moved on. So the companies came down, crossed this road, and then went off in front of Shadow Wood.
By the time these two companies had cleared the crow's nest and were in touch with the 15th Battalion in the forward area, it was 3 a.m. The journey so far, which had only been a mile from number 2 company's dugout, had taken over 2 hours, and the most difficult part of the assembly still lay ahead. According to the map, the sunken road, the vital right boundary, came to the surface near a copse, but, if so, no trace of that feature was now to be found. It had evidently been destroyed by shell fire. Compass bearings had therefore to be entirely relied upon. Finding their way in this fashion, the company commander and the leading files of number 1, in time, came upon an east-west sunken road, which at first sight they thought might be the looked-for rallying point. Closer investigation proved that the relative position to the crow's nest did not tally with previous bearings taken, and off they started forward again to find, ultimately, the looked-for boundary.
So there's the crow's nest. This is the Drocourt-Quéant Road, which is the right flank, and it's also the inter-army boundary, which is really important. This is where the sunken road comes up level with the ground, and they either came in single, one company at a time, or 2 in pairs. I don't know. So anyway, number 1 company was followed by number 4. They were going to the right flank. And number 2 company, followed by number 3, were on the left flank. And they were in front of Trigger Alley. I showed that earlier.
The 16th Battalion was to attack with all 4 companies, 2 in the leading wave and 2 30 yards in rear, in support. Numbers 1 and 2 companies, right to left, commanded respectively by Captain A. Lyons and Lieutenant Max Reed, formed the first wave. Numbers 4 and 3 companies, right to left, commanded respectively by Captain M. J. Mason and G. F. Mason, formed the support. In the assembly area, the right flanks of number 1 and 4 companies, which corresponded with the right boundary of the attack, were supposed to rest on the Drocourt-Quéant Road. That is a road running at right angles to the battlefront, at the point near where it came up to the surface level, about 400 yards southeast of the crow's nest. The other 2 companies were to form up on the left of numbers 1 and 4. It was, therefore, most necessary that the latter 2 units should be early in position, to give 2 and 3 companies ample opportunity to take the correct alignment.
So this is roughly where the sunken road becomes level. So this is a little man. The picture that you're going to see next is taken from where the little man is. So this is where the sunken road is now not sunken anymore, right about here. That's the clump of trees they were looking for. Yeah. And that's the crow's nest, and this is Shadow Wood. And ignore that; those are hay bales. So you can't see the Drocourt-Quéant Line from here, but you can clearly see from here the glacis rising towards the Hendecourt Ridge, where the Drocourt-Quéant Line was wisely established. So the same thing, but looking the other way. This is a battlefield tour, by the way. So you're supposed to be able now to kind of rewalk this field because there isn't any more detail to get. I mean, it's all here. So anyway, that's where the sunken road. That's what they were looking for. That's Shadow Wood, Crow's Nest, and that's that clump of trees they were looking for.
Not finding the exact spot on the road, Number 1 Company commander, realizing that the fate of the whole assembly depended upon his unit being in place, gave up the search for any more exact locations. He arbitrarily took up position on the road and, pointing to the north, ordered his men to extend straight out in that direction. This movement was quickly executed, compass men leading. Number 4 Company extended in similar fashion, close behind Number 1, and was soon in place. Number 3, the support company on the left, was then discovered and led into place on the left of Number 4. But Number 2, the attacking company on that flank, which should have moved in ahead of Number 3, was nowhere to be seen. It had wandered off the battalion front to the right, and did not get into place until shortly before 0 hour, if then. It seems probable, judging by subsequent developments, that part of Number 2 Company was mixed up with Number 4 on the right flank.
Yeah, that just shows a bad decision is better than no decision. So this is looking towards the 57th Division, the 3rd Army area. That's the same trees I pointed out earlier. I just pivoted a bit to the left. And in here, there's Doxon Alley, and the South Lancashire, one of the battalions of the South Lancashire are supposed to be out there. But now they don't know yet that there's nobody attacking on the right. They assume that there's people attacking on the right. So they sent an officer to go liaise with the battalion there to coordinate the attack, and they were disappointed.
In the meantime, whilst the missing company was being searched for, further complications ensued. Captain Sidney Johnson, second in command of Number 1, who had been ordered to get in touch with the attacking battalion on the right flank, the 2 Seven Kings Liverpool Regiment, and coordinate arrangements with it, sent a message up the line to his company commander to say that he could find no trace of troops in that direction. The time was then about 4:30 a.m., 0 hour being at 5 a.m. Following close on the heels of this message, about 4:45 a.m., when every second was precious, Johnson himself came running up. He reported the discovery of a post of the flank battalion, but stated that the non-commissioned officer in charge of it knew nothing whatever of the attack about to take place, and, quite rightly, was positive his unit was not taking any part in it. When this news reached Number 1 Company commander, he was stationed about center of the battalion battlefront, in the midst of a group of officers and non-commissioned officers, concerning himself with the placing of his men. After Johnson had delivered his message, there was complete silence until one of the non-commissioned officers present spoke up, saying, "There's the Colonel." All eyes turned, and were able to distinguish the form of Colonel Peck, followed by his piper, probably Jimmy Grote, a few yards away, coming towards them. The officer commanding Number 1 told the commanding officer what Johnson had just reported, and the colonel replied,
"Well, it doesn't make any difference. We've got to go forward whether they do or not."
That settled the matter.
So there's Trigger Cops again, Butt Wood. So I'm at the right flank in the Hendecourt-Cagnicourt Road. And the next picture is basically taken from this vantage, and you can see Trigger Cops, Butt Wood.
But other strange happenings were going on in the assembly area. As the 16th men moved into their places, they were startled to have one German after another spring up in front of them with hands above the head. At first, they thought it was a series of listening posts they had stumbled upon. But when more and more Germans surrendered, they realized they were actually in the midst of a crowd of the enemy, only too anxious to become prisoners. The first deserter was found between 4 and 4:30 a.m. and rushed back at the double to the foot of the crow's nest, where an examining post was stationed. This prisoner, who admitted he was a deserter, stated that his battalion was going to attack at 6 a.m. He further said that many battalions and field guns were at that moment out in front of the wire in no man's land, a state of affairs which was quite possible, as there was a stretch of 800 yards between the Canadian positions and the wire of the Drocourt-Quéant Line. As prisoner after prisoner came dribbling in, they had all the same story. But what could be done? The attack had to go on. It could only be hoped that the enemy would get the greater surprise of the two. At exactly 10 minutes to 5, in the conditions described, the assembly of the 16th was reported complete to the commanding officer, who, with his piper and battalion headquarters, was stationed in the center of the leading wave. Tanks had been promised, but there was no sight or sound of them at that hour. At 5 a.m., the barrage dropped fortunately, as the official report states, for the most part, all right.
This is just footage of Highlanders. It's not the correct type of tank, but whatever. So now the German point of view. No, this is from the 23rd Feldartillerie Regiment history, 16th German Division. This is the German perspective on the coming attack. 5 a.m. Cagnicourt, September 2nd, 1918. Note that the author refers to 28th Infantry Regiment, 16th Division, defending Villers-les-Cagnicourt, which was fighting the 2nd Canadian Brigade in front of Upton Wood. The 164th Regiment and the 73rd Hanoverian Fusiliers, 111th Division, more on these later, were defending Cagnicourt against the 3rd Canadian Brigade. The 73rd Hanoverian Fusiliers are famous for being the unit of Ernst Junger. Unfortunately, like 10 days before, he on the Somme, he got injured for the last time, like his 28th wound or something. So this Cagnicourt is not in Storm of Steel for that reason. But anyway.
Das 23. Rheinische Feldartillerieregiment, from the history of the 23rd Field Artillery Regiment. 5 a.m. Cagnicourt, September 2nd, 1918. September 2nd dawned. This day is one of the most difficult that the regiment endured during the war. During 4 difficult years of war, the regiment fought valiantly and was always assigned to difficult positions. It distinguished itself in attacks as well as in several defensive battles. Up to this date, the regiment had never abandoned artillery pieces to the enemy, and only a few members of the 23rd Regiment were missing. Until today, the regiment had only taken part in victorious battles, and now it was facing the greatest trial, and some were anxiously wondering whether the regiment could prevail in this unfortunate battle. In this respect, we can be proud that the trial was overcome with such honor that September the 2nd, 1918 will be marked as a great date for the regiment. Although we lost artillery pieces to the enemy, under such circumstances we can say that they were lost honorably. On our side, deployed on September 2nd, north of the Arras-Caen Railroad, was the 3rd Ersatz Division, and to the south the 16th Division with 2 regiments of the 3rd Reserve Division. 2 battle-tested and very weak divisions were in the Quéant Line, north of the road, the 2nd Guards Reserve Division, and to the south the 111th Division with the 164th Regiment to the north and the 73rd Hanoverian Fusilier Regiment to the south. There was also an intervention division, the 1st Guards Reserve Division. During the night of the 1st to the 2nd September 1918, there was enemy air activity with constant bombardment of our front line and rear positions. From 6 to 8 illuminated parachutes were constantly in the air, lighting the roads as if it were daytime. The infantry at the front could not rest. A Canadian report relates that the fighting lasted all night and was still continuing when the barrage of September 2nd began. Our artillery shelled assembly points, such as the Haute Forest, probably the wood of Candicourt, the Chateau, probably the Chateau of Candicourt, the eastern section of Candicourt, the Cocher Trench, and Riencourt. At 4:50 Paris time, an extremely heavy enemy bombardment suddenly began, which struck the front only for a short time and then became a rolling barrage, followed by tanks and infantry in force. At the same time, there was a fire on the rear positions, which disrupted communications. Because the enemy made liberal use of smoke, observation was hindered. The enemy attacked along the entire front of the 17th German Army from north of Dury to east of Sailly-Sailly-Selle. After a short and hard fight, the troops deployed on the front of the 16th Division were overrun by many tanks advancing in the mist. Here it must be considered that our deployed troops were very fatigued by the fighting and the line was only lightly held, but this does not explain the setback. It is probably because the troops faced a mass of tanks for the first time. The troops were paralyzed. However, the 3rd Battalion of the 28th Regiment defended itself bravely until it was outflanked on both sides, and only a few groups reached the Quéant-Drocourt line. Reserve Lieutenant Krummel of the 28th Regiment reports that because of the artificial mist, the smoke from rifles and phosphorus grenades and gas, nothing could be seen at first. The gas irritated our eyes and several began to cough violently. Others vomited, etc.
So this is a map taken from their history. There's Cagnicourt, there's Hendecourt, this the Hochwald, it's Upton Wood, and these are the all the battery positions of the 23rd Regiment. They were all facing 1st Canadian Division. Very, very fortunate to have found this book. And just as an aside, the Harvest of Steel. The bombardment during the Second Battle of Arras, 1918, was one of the heaviest and most devastating of the war. The Canadian Corps commander, Arthur Currie, always wanted more guns, of which he was plentifully supplied at Cagnicourt. From August 27 to September 3, 1918, the Canadian Corps fired 847,990 artillery shells of all caliber on a 4-kilometer front, a concentration per diem that dwarfed the German shelling at Verdun in 1916. Farmers still find hundreds of unexploded shells to this day, despite that the fighting in this sector only lasted a little more than a week. And it's common by the cemeteries, they'll leave the ordnance there. They're still finding as much as the year before. But this wasn't the Somme. This was the Drocourt-Quéant Line. It was a very short battle, but anyway, there was a lot of art. They were awash with artillery shells by then. So now the tanks catch up, because I did promise you some tanks and a tank private, right? So the heavy tanks catch up. There were 3 types of tank: the Mark 5 male and female. This is the picture here is a Mark 5, a survivor of the war. It's a Mark 5 male. It's got, you can tell because it's got big sponsons, and they're equipped with 6-pounder naval guns. Females have smaller sponsons, and they're equipped with machine guns. There was also at Cagnicourt 2 Mark 5 stars, which is a Mark 5 that was elongated. It's supposed to have better trench crossing capability. There are only 2 of these used at Cagnicourt. And this is 9th Tank Battalion at the time of the Second Battle of Arras. You can see this is a Mark 5 mail tank. You can see the distinctive sponson and the 6-pounder naval gun. And this is the first tank ever to have a swastika on it. If you look closely, there's a swastika good luck charm. This is as close as I could get to the tanks at Cagnicourt. And you're going to see a female. And I struggled to try and find what the names were of the tanks on September 2nd, but they didn't have time after the bloodbath they took at Amiens. They restocked the tanks, and they didn't have time to name them, I don't think. See, this is a male again. I guess I didn't need to put 2 of those. See, that's a female. It's Mark V, but with smaller guns. So anyway, the approach march of number 1 Composite Company, 14th Tank Battalion. Now I'm going to use Captain Pemberton. The company that fought at Cagnicourt was called number 1 Composite Company. The reason it was called Composites because it included Mark V stars, so it was a composite company. And they were coming in from Hayney-Nell, west of Cherisy. So there's Hayney-Nell. There's Cherisy. We talked about that earlier. And they had to travel on the roads. And let's listen to Captain Pemberton.
Report by Captain Pemberton, Officer Commanding No. 1 Composite Company, 14th Tank Battalion. The tanks left Hayney-Nell at 11 p.m. on September 1st, 1918. Lieutenant Week's tank being left to follow on, having shortly arrived from the base and having slight trouble. The route crossed the ridge between Hayney-Nell and Cherisy, and following the Cherisy-Hendecourt road to the starting point.
So now he continues. He's going from Cherisy to the Crow's Nest. So there's Cherisy. There's the Crow's Nest.
Pemberton continues, when through Cherisy, the column was subjected to persistent shell fire, 4.2 and 5.9 calibers, and it is thought the enemy was aware that tanks were approaching that night, but had not actually heard them. Owing to bad going, most of the approach had to be done on the roads, and owing to traffic blocks and the Mark 5 star tank in the column, the arranged starting point was not actually reached. The tanks refilled along the way at the spot Michel has shown on the map, in the red circle, and left at 0-4 minutes, but arrived before the barrage lifted.
So they went down this way. They went past Sun Quarry Cemetery, followed this road here, and at this red spot is where they fueled up, because it'll come up later about the fueling, and came into Hendecourt and negotiated their way between Shadow Wood and the Crow's Nest. So we're back now. My favorite aerial photo. We've got, sorry to be repetitive, but it's important. That's the Crow's Nest. That's Hendecourt. That's Shadow Wood. That's Trigger Copse and Butt Wood. And you can actually just make out there, that's Dominion Cemetery. So it's built like literally in the DQ line. So number 1 Composite Company, 14th Tanks, under command of Pemberton, will continue his report.
Pemberton continues, at 0, the tanks came under a very heavy barrage until past the Crow's Nest. During the approach, Sergeant Hodgson, commanding the Mark 5 star tank, was wounded. Lance Corporal Wilkinson carrying on. A runner was killed also. Number 1, Section Commander, Lieutenant Knight, was unfortunately wounded just past the Crow's Nest, and 2 of his tanks failed to reach the Drocourt-Quéant Line, one of them Lieutenant Streets, engaging the enemy before the line, but getting ditched in some low ground just west of Trigger Copse. Lieutenant Smart's tank having a big end gone about 200 yards east of the Crow's Nest. A big end is the main bearing, a catastrophic failure. Sections did not quite keep their boundaries after Lieutenant Knight had been wounded, but the brigade front was covered satisfactorily, and this portion of the Drocourt-Quéant Line satisfactorily mopped up. Many machine gun posts were dealt with and the garrison more or less surrendered en bloc.
So there's two sections. Lieutenant Knight was in command. He wouldn't have been in a tank. He'd have been walking by the tanks to control his 9 tanks. He had 9 tanks. And they went straight for Trigger Copse. There was a Lieutenant Street's tank was ditched about here, and the engine trouble, engine failure, tank 9163, Second Lieutenant Smart was about there. Now, number 2 section, we're not really too concerned with them in this story, but number 2 section was on the right. They came up side by side with number 1 section. It was in command of Second Lieutenant Ginger. And it had supposedly 8 tanks, but one, as we heard one was left behind at Henninel. So there were only one section had 9 tanks, the other section had 7. So there's the crow's nest. Oh, and this is a picture. So the tanks, that's the crow's nest. The tanks would have come across here. So you can imagine them trundling along. I just wonder, my great uncle, a farm boy from Quebec, seeing this, like he must have thought he was like, in another world. Pemberton, this is a picture of him in 1908. I wasn't able to find his family. I should have been. But he was awarded the Military Cross for his handling of his company on September 2nd, 1918.
Captain Alfred Grossholtz Pemberton, MC, for gallantry and devotion to duty in the period from August 25th to September 4th, during which this officer commanded a composite company and took part in the operations near the Bois du Sart on August 27th and the piercing of the Drocourt-Quéant Line near Cagnicourt on September the 2nd. During the approach march on the 1st, his tank column was subjected to heavy shell fire, bombing by enemy aircraft, gas, and finally, machine gun fire. By the magnificent example that he set and by his energy and determination, he was mainly responsible for getting his tanks into action in spite of these exceptional difficulties and the fact that many of his men were partially incapacitated by gas. He has set a high standard and shown a fine example throughout the operations.
Now, I did a deep dive for this project, right? And I tried to find more on Captain Pemberton. Turns out his dad was the famous novelist Max Pemberton. His godfather was Lord Northcliffe, the newspaper magnate who was also the chief propagandist for the British during the war. And he was the great-grandson of Madame Tussaud, of Madame Tussaud's waxworks. And I know for a fact that he worked for the papers that belonged to Northcliffe his whole career. I saw correspondence, and Northcliffe left him 500 pounds in his will. You'd think I could find the descendant of Max Pemberton somewhere, but and Pemberton's not that common a name, so I was really disappointed. But some lady at his school, his alma mater, got me his graduation picture, so that's what we have to go by. Now, another tangent, Lieutenant Jeffrey St. John Knight. I don't know if you remember, the number 1 section company commander was Lieutenant Knight. He was badly wounded. He eventually died of wounds that he received at the Crow's Nest at Boulogne-sur-Mer. The cemetery in Boulogne was full, so he was laid to rest in nearby Turlington. His sister was given a pass to visit him before he died. So this is Turlington. He's in here. And Pemberton mentions a runner being killed. Well, it must be Private I.H. Leckie. He was likely the runner killed on the way to the Crow's Nest. His body was brought back to the assembly area and buried in Sun Quarry Cemetery. So all the bodies of it's important. All the bodies are accounted for. That's how I could tell who the unknown tank private was. And that's Sun Quarry. Very typical battlefield cemetery. That's Upton Wood. That's the Crow's Nest. And that's the road to Hendecourt. And the tanks would have gone right by here. And that was already, this cemetery opened at the end of August 1918. Mostly 2nd Canadian Division men. So part 14, the attack of September. Do you guys want to continue, or do you want to do this in 2 parts?